Now, we have Conrad's Dr. Professor Conrad Fisher, a priest who is also a union alum and graduates with whom we studied, and our dear friend. So, and his topic will be on Saint Evagrius. So we're kind of gradually going back to the roots, one of the greatest fourth century theologians. So, Conrad, we would like to welcome you.
So, in listening to Julia, it's in the Olympics, the competition of the synchronized swimming, you know that one, where people are individuals are swimming, but they're doing the same moves. They're in the same direction, but they're different people, and it looks very beautiful. So that's what it is. This is being here today and hearing this is like spiritual synchronized swimming competition. With the team going the same directions. So uh, what I'm going to speak about is going to sound like I consider myself a citizen of the world, right? That's Jefferson, right? The world is my country, my religion is kindness. But the uh, statistics I'll give, not being able to separate from my professor of medicine head, is American. And America has some very distinctly unique illnesses. And those distinct illnesses are not high blood pressure, diabetes, or cancer. It is a death. There is no society at which you have the same level of drug overdoses. Drug overdoses went to death from 20 to 50 to 100,000. 100,000 dead, 2,000 people a week. Gunshots have gone to 50,000. In 20 years of all of America's wars, if you add up Iraq and Afghanistan, the number of children shot and killed in our schools is 6 times more. So we had about 5,100 deaths of all armed forces in those wars, but 30,000 dead children. So by gunshots. I finished a new documentary last year on interviews with the parents of children who were killed in school shootings. Um, and for better or for worse, I'm happy or sad to say that that film just was accepted to Tribeca Film Festival. So that puts us 50-50 in Oscar run. And most of you know that the last documentary we did go to the Oscars. But what does it mean when gunshot deaths of children, gunshot deaths of adults, drug overdose deaths? What is sick in the soul? That suicide is at an all-time historical high. And I hope that won't seem like conflation. It's a great word. Conflation to say gunshot deaths, suicide, drug overdose, and the illness of killing children in schools. There is a deep spiritual illness in our civilization. And it will never be filled up by achieving the world's first trillionaire, because no amount of materiality will be able to fill up the God-shaped hole that is in our souls. So we want to address this both from what I loved about Julia's talk about the Jesus prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on us. The prayer of the heart, which I hope to be presenting on the American Society of Church History in 6 months, because my submission was just made. St. Theophan the Recluse. So, as doctors of the human soul, which is what we are, It's much easier in a way to deal with cancer. Cancer deaths have gone down 25% in 25 years. Breast cancer has become a chronic manageable disease. HIV, there hasn't been a child born HIV positive in New York State in 20 years. Are relatively easy compared to the spiritual illness that our society has. So, psychoanalysis as a way of dealing with depression and other illnesses, I wouldn't say it's discarded, but it doesn't work. In other words, you can understand everything about why you're doing something that's harmful to yourself and other people, but it doesn't mean you're going to change the behavior because, as Julia just said, for the good that I would, I do not, the evil that I would not, that I do in the epistles. So you can understand all about it, doesn't mean you're going to change behavior. So what we're looking for is behavior change, and behavior comes from thought. Behavior comes from thought. And that's why my hypothesis, our hypothesis, is that the desert monastics of the 3rd and 4th century invented cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is you don't have to understand it, you just have to change the behavior. If you're depressed, dress well, brush your teeth, fix your hair, put on your makeup, not me. Change the behavior and you'll understand it later. And so cognitive behavioral therapy was then forgotten for 1,500 years. That is my hypothesis. And so let's review our dude, St. Evagrius, right? Second half of the 4th century, hung out with the biggest luminaries of his age, with Basil and Gregory the Theologian, or Gregory Nazianzen. And so what was the highest goal for a Christian prior to the Battle of Milvian Bridge? Prior to the Battle of Milvian Bridge and the conversion of Constantine and becoming a state religion? Because prior to that, the emperors would persecute. Martyrdom, that's correct. So what ends up happening when martyrdom is no longer the highest goal that you can have to die for Christ externally? I mean, I hope that something in me is dying for Christ, hopefully the worst parts of myself. So there's no martyrdom because now Evagrius is living and working a half a century after martyrdom's over. So what's the highest aspiration? This is why the desert monastics flourished so much. Because the goal to be able to die for the love of God and stand as a Christian witness was not what was happening, because the boss is Christian. Get promoted. So what's the highest goal now? Contemplation and prayer. To go out and be in the desert. Cenobitic monasticism, cenobitic with a C. It took me a long time to realize, why is it with a C? Because in the Greek, the C, there's 3 letters for sigma. And so they're alone, but they're alone together. They're alone together. And you're alone all the time. You know, 1/3 of people in New York City live alone. But in the desert, they never had any of the rushing loneliness that our society has. Our civilization, our American civilization, in many ways European, but the thing is, didn't have the kind of loneliness, the absence of spiritual friendship. And I would also hypothesize, thinking about this, that that's part of the reason there's so much suicide, because it's a deficiency. Now, as we know, when I came to Plato later in life, there's an ideal form of a circle. There's an ideal form of a cell phone. There's an ideal form of a phone and squares. There's an ideal form of love and friendship and goodness and beauty. What's the ideal form of evil, according to our friend Socrates, Plato? And that there's no ideal evil to aspire to. Is it deficiency disease? Deprivation. It's kind of like coronary artery disease or stroke. peripheral vascular disease, which I see every day. I see every day. Deficiency of blood to the brain is a stroke. Deficiency of blood to the heart is a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, which is the most common cause of death. Deficiency of blood to the legs, which is I see amputations every day. Every day. Deficiency of the good. And so our society, my hypothesis, is that it's a spiritual deficiency of good. It's a deficiency of spiritual friendship. I feel closer to people in this room I never met in my life before than because we have a common bond, we have a shared blood flow, a shared vasculature, spiritual vasculature of people that we've never met before, but met in this meeting an hour ago because we have a common friend. Huh? Hey, are you a friend of Jesus? Yeah. And so cognitive behavioral therapy with this deficiency is that was there any suicide in those Cenobitic monastics? I've looked and looked and looked. I see no record of suicide amongst those people being alone. Yet people in our society are with people by thousands and tens of thousands and alone but dying. Hmm? And of course, the most tragic of that is teen suicide. So Evagrius gets thrown into the spiritual dumpster. We're in New Jersey. He got thrown. Anybody remember who Jimmy Hoffa was? He's a mafia guy. He got thrown into a dumpster outside the Meadowlands, never found. Okay, like a buried mobster. Okay, condemned and discarded, and personally condemned. Writings, most of the Greek writings, wiped out or translated into Armenian Sogdian. What's Sogdian? What language is that? Sogdian? Sogdian was a language spoken for 1,200 years on the Silk Road across what would now be about 15 countries. Translated into an unknown language called Sogdian, also some into Georgian, Arabic. A couple of things left in Greek, but they have to change his name. So like Dalton Trumbo, you know who Dalton Trumbo is? Dalton Trumbo was a screenwriter, won a couple of Academy Awards, and was blacklisted. Wouldn't give up his friends to McCarthy. Was blacklisted until he got brought back to write the screenplay for Spartacus. Okay? Got brought back. So he is thrown there and blacklisted. And why Evagrius and why we're going to be hearing a lot more about him over the next 25 years is because some of the writings didn't come out of those languages until like 90 minutes ago, which is to say 1970, 1990, 2020. Translated out. Wow. A comparison of his works in Syriac and Greek English was just published this year. If you're in our business, you think that's exciting. My God, it's side-by-side translations of Syriac, Greek, and English of Evagrius. How exciting is that? And that's why it has a sense to me that when I was a teenager, when I read Jack Kerouac, On the Road, the only ones to me are the mad ones, mad to live, mad to speak, the ones who never say a dull or commonplace thing, but burn, 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 like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders amongst the stars. It has that feeling of Jack Kerouac, actually, if you read Evagrius. And so these translations would say that there's no defective original sin. That's a hard thing. And I'm saying that in the Protestant seminary. And part of the reason that we know God knows it's true is whether or not I will be struck dead in a prominent Protestant seminary by saying that, that according to Evagrius, nothing that is created by God, nothing in our heart is created evil. We're not created with evil. Evil is not deadly sins, because that's where 7 deadly sins comes from. 7 deadly sins was codified first by Evagrius, but he didn't call them deadly sins. He said evil thoughts. It's like bad weather, insects, it's cold, it's hot. And so, in our continual prayer, as we're called to do, praying without ceasing, you can't do that if your mind is subject to bad weather. We can't have this conference if it's raining outside and there's a storm on and the windows are open. Can't do that. And so he didn't say there were 7 deadly sins. He said there are evil logismoi, evil thoughts. And so he also said taxonomy, meaning kingdom, phylum, genus, species, family, same taxonomy, huh? And so gluttony, well, our mutual teacher and friend, John McGuckin, would say, oh, if you're out there in the desert and, you're in your cell, what is it that you most desire, that you're missing? And it's not, it's not genitalia. It's a bacon cheeseburger. Okay, it's lunch. That's the thing you're missing the most, because also they taught, well, if you control your caloric and other appetite and tastes. Evagrius is big about don't have a lot of various foods. By the way, later people, 100 and 200 years later, thought would trash talk Evagrius by saying, this guy, man, he might have had some good intentions, but Evagrius, like talking about how you're gonna like not sleep and have almost no water and deprive yourself of food. You can't get there. It was like it's a fantasy. He was deluded because he spent so much time. He said, compel the young to control of their stomach and compel the old to control of their anger and vanity. Because gluttony leads to lust. Because if you're starving to death, you're not too energetic for other things. And avarice, greed, gluttony. Childhood obesity rates, diabetes and 14-year-olds from obesity. 50% of some states in morbid obesity. I refer people for surgery. I refer people for surgery for weight loss all the time. And that's why we have so much Ozempic, right? But that's the origin of it. So I guess it's not so old, is it? Oh, by the way, chlamydia rates are up by 300%. Syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia are up by 300%. I'm chief of infectious diseases at my hospital health system. And the other thing is, the country of Antigua, Kitts, Ecuador, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan has eliminated all congenital syphilis. There's no babies born with syphilis. But in the United States, it's up by 1,000%, 10 times. Oh, I guess these are really old ideas. I guess not. They're not old ideas. And then sadness. Well, sadness, yeah, it's not in all of the systems. And anger, acedia is a unique word, really. I don't know why people call it it's spelled with a C, because it's a kappa in Greek. Acedia. Acedia is a unique word. It's a unique, I think, monastic word, because it gets translated later in the 7 deadly sins by Pope Leo the occasionally great, Pope Leo the sometimes great. Um, tran translates into sloth. Translates into sloth, laziness. But it's not sloth and laziness. I don't think there's any point in going on with this discussion. You know what I mean? None of you are going to understand it. It's not going to go anywhere. There's nobody here. There's no audience. Who's going to see this? Why make these preparations? Why do this work? Why try to publish anything? Nobody's going to listen, right? T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, right? I have heard the mermaids singing, but I know they do not sing for me. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo, making decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Dare I eat a peach? Dare I rock the universe? Proof rock. That's a key to you. Nothing I'm going to do is going to make any difference. Why pray? Okay. Or like Rumi, Molavi. Okay. One, I heard a man sing, crying, Allah, Allah. A cynical man says, I've heard you praying, but have you ever gotten a response? That's a key to you. Nothing I'm going to do is make any difference. Now, vainglory and pride. It's hard thing is this is vainglory. By the way, you know I'm the best-selling textbook author of medical students of textbook. Never mind. That's vainglory. Okay, but pride, which is I'm really happy we put this panel on. I'm glad to make some new friends and meet new people. I'm glad that we have a live AAR meeting, and I couldn't have done this myself. I couldn't have done this without Sergey. I couldn't have gotten here because other people didn't show up at the last minute. And Julia and Judith jumped in, and it's wonderful that we can all do this together with Matthew Vaughn in the grace of God in this beautiful holy place. That's not what we mean by that pride, Sid. That pride means no one helped me. I did this all by myself. I don't need any of you. I'm great. Making Princeton great again. Okay? I didn't need anybody. That's the sin of pride. It's not saying together we did something wonderful. We made something beautiful for God. So what happens is that the seven evil thoughts, John Cassian is Evagrius' student. John Cassian goes to what is now the city of Marseille in the south of France and sets up monasteries, mostly for men, some for women, and writes his conferences of the church fathers and his institutes. And he writes the same things that Evagrius does, but changes the word. Instead of apatheia, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. I'm not worried about my rent. I have 4 children. How are they doing in school? Apatheia is I'm not touched by these earthly cares. I only feel the spiritual light of God. Evagrius would call it the sapphire light of God, as when Moses is on Mount Tabor, the sapphire light of God. Apatheia, not apathetic, but with free. What in the Eastern traditions would be called samadhi, a freedom from earthly cares and taking a jacuzzi in the love of God. Okay, and so John Cassian though airbrushes Evagrius's name out because Evagrius now is persona non grata, and but changes the word. It's not small to change evil thoughts with like the weather, to change it into faults. Now you're broken. And broken, you can't get in a way that you really can never get fixed because it's more structural. And then Pope Gregory changes it into deadly sins. Oh, why should I try to get better? I have faults and deadly sins. Switches a couple things out, changes sadness and acedia to sloth, adds envy. Okay? And now the sin precedes our acts or thought we're defective. Every child is born with syphilis. Okay. By the way, one of my favorite things to do with people, what was Mary Magdalene's profession? They say prostitute, and like, nah, it doesn't say that. Okay. And so Cassian's ideas are alive today because his institutes and the conferences of the fathers is the basis of the rule of the Benedictines, and which becomes the Trappists and the Cistercians. So we're looking at all these horrible things. Actually, the church attendance has actually stabilized in the last couple of years. Church attendance is stabilized. Mainline Protestantism is having a problem. Do you know there's only one seminary in the whole city of New York? Union Theological Seminary is the last one. New York Theological Seminary closed. Okay, and when we're talking about the desert monastics and their asceticism, it's very important for us to be teaching students and preaching on asceticism didn't mean skipping lunch. It didn't mean intermittent fasting. Ascesis is the Greek word for athletic. And that's why you said spiritual combat, because it's in the same sense of a wrestler. Same sense of going to the gym. Okay. And the reason to fight sin and these thoughts is so that we can commune with God, so we can have the weather is free and the room temperature is nice, so that we can pray, so that we can have agape and apatheia. And that's the goal of our prayer. So the cognitive behavioral therapy is to be able to say, to when the thoughts come, if you talk to psychiatrists like I do all the time, tell me what cognitive behavioral therapy is. And cognitive behavioral therapy is that thoughts come into you that said, you're not any good, you're not going to get any better, people don't like you, you're lousy. And you're supposed to choose different thoughts, and you don't go with those thoughts. Or again, back to Rumi, the armies of despair assemble, but I am not going with them. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, though you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come again. The armies of despair assemble, but I am not going with them. So choose your thoughts. So Evagrius and the Kephalia Gnostica only came into English in the last 15, 20 years. It was in Syriac. There was a time when evil did not exist. There will be a time when evil will no longer exist. But there was never a time when virtue, arete, did not exist, and there will never be a time when it does not exist, for the seeds of virtue are indestructible. In his work that he wrote on thoughts, evil is impermanent. And the other thing is, we got more on our side for good than there is for evil, because there's demonic thoughts that are suggested to us. Because in orthodoxy, we take our demonology seriously. I actually find it very freeing. I presented this at the American Society of Peace, a different part of it, as church history, to Protestant audience. And, like demons is like, you're watching The Exorcist, you're watching alien movies. But I actually find it very freeing. I think it's very good to be able to say, well, it's not me that's defective. There are these people. I'm trying to pray and be good and be virtuous, love God, pray continuously. And there's these other beings that are trying to screw me up. So it's not me. I just have to fight back. Fight the power. And so if we're poor demons, and they're men who succumb to anger, the angriest of men. And what do we become if we fight back and pray? By true prayer, we become angels. How do you survive and thrive? By being athletic. Go to the gym. We throw in our throne, and as I said, I'm an infectious disease doctor, chair of infectious disease. We have antibiotics. I hand out antibiotics all the time. Well, according to Evagrius, there's antibiotics spiritually. Talking back, antireticos. It's prescriptive. It's like a medical textbook. Something bad comes in a particular way, you talk back to them. And then we can have our connection with God. Spiritual SPF, is sunblock. Okay. Spiritual sunblock, but like really good. Really good, really good, so that we can get. Now, you see, if Cassian changes apatheia to purity of heart, I don't love that. One of the great things about going to seminary and getting ordained is you get to disagree with saints. Get to disagree with saints. John, bro, let me tell you, I know a lot of killers. There are serial murderers. There are who are very pure of heart, wanting to do evil, you know what I mean? But they're pure of heart, you know what I mean? They're undivided. They're very, very uniquely singular in their desire to hurt people. Now, agape is in both Evagrius and Cassian, so that we get to that. That's the goal, and that's what we should preach and teach on, not deprivation. That demons don't know our hearts, because the only God sees into our hearts, us. What it is the heart is basically a 5G or 5,000G network to divinity. Huh? And so, because our hearts is between God and us. And there we go. Oh, I'm going to go there. So it's my next thing. You know, one of the most striking things for me is that, did you know that, Julie, did you know that the Jesus prayer was considered so radical that in about 1912, the Tsar sent warships into Mount Athos to stop the monks? Because, like, there's some bad stuff. We don't want those radicals praying, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. Yeah. The Tsar actually went to attack them and actually arrested the monks and shoved a bunch of them to Siberia. Yeah. Why? Because if you have a direct contact with God through the Jesus prayer, you don't need an organized structure. Huh? Do it yourself, right? And so, Evagrius, talk back. Choose your thoughts. If you stop a thought with the Jesus prayer and other antireticos, then you're free and you can be healed, separating from thoughts, separating from memory. But you see, the thing is that my psychiatric friends, you know why this is almost never studied? 90% of the American population believes in a higher power of some kind, but only 10% of psychiatrists. And that's why they don't study it. We'll skip Cassian. This is where we leave you. That is the Greek for logismos photos. That's the type of font. Logismos photos. NT cardia. Cardiac? Huh? In your heart. Pro gymnasmon. Pro gym? Where we get the word gym. The gym. That's right. That's where we leave you. The gym. Okay. Practice thoughts of light in your heart every day, as soon as you get up. Okay. An exercise, a practice, and in the spiritual gym. Booyah. Thank you.